What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Crawl TV. I've really been banging them out because there's a ton of work to do on this old CJ7. Today we're going to go through all the fluids. That's front, rear differentials, and then the transmission, transfer case, and the motor. So we're going to get this thing fully flushed out and refreshed so that it's ready for the first trip this Jeep's going to go on, which is Tierra del Sol. And I don't know if I've told you guys this, but I'm actually driving this Jeep from my house to Tierra del Sol, so it has to be roadworthy too. That's in about a month and a half from now. I got a little bit of time left, but there's a huge list of stuff to do. So let's jump into it. We're going to start with this front differential and just work our way through it. So you might notice that the tie rod and drag link are out of the Jeep right now. I was in the middle of that high steer kit install when I found the tie rod and drag link were both bent because they were binding on that front leaf spring. That was the whole reason I was doing the high steer kit, was to avoid that kind of contact, which could bind my steering off-road, but also bend parts. So while I'm waiting on new steering, I've got this front differential fully accessible, and there's no better time to do this front diff cover and get this gear oil changed out than now. So kind of an opportune time. If you're working on your Jeep and you're going to pull your front differential off, you will have your tie rod a little bit in the way, but you can still get the cover off. And in other news, I did figure out what I'm going to call this Jeep, because every one of my vehicles seems to have some kind of name. And this Jeep, after the LED headlights and then finding the Romex behind the dash and seeing all the flux core welds all over it, I've decided to call it the high school Jeep. And the reason I'm calling it that is because this is a bunch of stuff that I would have done to a Jeep if I was in high school and I didn't know any better. Just bad mods one at a time. And now it's my job as an adult to remove the high school mods. So we will be working on the high school Jeep today, and should be a pretty messy day, actually. I hate gear oil. It smells really bad. But without further ado, let's jump into that front differential and we'll get that cover off, get that surface cleaned up, and get that new aux locker diff cover ready to go in. I'll tell you why I got those diff covers in a minute. So we're going to start with removing this Dana 30 front diff cover. I have an oil pan here. You can drain the differential if you want, but I'm just going to drain it as I pull the diff cover off. Oh. Wow. Now I've got a little pry bar here. I'm going to use that to get the cover off. Okay. It really popped off of there. You can see this gear oil is pretty gross. It's got a couple different flavors to it. Now what we'll do before we clean up this mating surface here is just blast some O'Reilly parts cleaner into it, get that old gear oil out of there. So I learned a couple things about this front end just now. Obviously this is a Dana 30 front axle. I didn't know that this axle had a locker in the front. That little like infinity style symbol right there is a Richmond gear symbol. This is a PowerTrax Lock-Right lunchbox locker, and these markings on this ring gear here, let me spin this around. I locked one of my hubs so that I could rotate this axle, and the markings on this ring gear tell me that this gear is actually a Dana 30 456. So I have 456 gears and I have a lunchbox locker in the front. That is a huge win for me. I knew it was geared tall. I thought it maybe had 410s in it, but 456s are going to help me out so much with these 33-inch tires on the Rubicon Trail. I'm really, really happy about that. And that probably means that if I were to take this thing apart further, somebody may have already put chromoly axle shafts in here. So we're ready to throw this Dana 30 diff cover on, and this is the Aux Locker diff cover. I told you guys I would tell you why I picked this diff cover, and the reason I picked it was because I thought it would be really helpful to have a front locker on the Rubicon Trail. So I was going to throw this locker cover on with a diff cover gasket so that if I chose to buy a front locker, I could pull this off super easy and throw a cable lock system in here. And this diff cover is pre-drilled for a cable locker. But now that I know I have 456 gears and a PowerTrax Lock-Right lunchbox locker in the front, I really don't need to set up a cable lock system. That saves me a ton of time and money. But obviously I'm still going to use this diff cover. My plans changed a little bit and I'm happy about it. So I'm going to throw this on now with the new bolts that came with it, and then we'll fill it up with gear oil. Now we're jumping over to the rear axle, and this axle is an AMC 20. The diff cover is like a big bowl, and this one is using Torx bolts right now, so I will be happy to get rid of those. I love Torx screws in construction. I hate Torx bolts on Jeeps. And this rear diff leaks a lot, so this is the one that really needed to get addressed. There we go. Now I'm going to get my face away from this gear oil as much as I can. And this diff cover came off way too easy. It looks like it had a gasket. This is a cork gasket, and the cork gasket was pushed above the mating surface, so it wasn't doing anything. This is what existed before lube locker existed. These did not work as well, obviously. There wasn't a whole lot of gear oil in there. Did you notice that? I did. But the teeth look good. We have a locker back here as well. I am gonna take some time here and try and identify what locker that is. You may have noticed that on the Aux Locker diff cover for the AMC 20 there is no fill plug. That's because you fill these axles from the yoke side of them, not the diff cover side of them. So this is a T55 drain plug. I gotta squeeze in here. Well, without being too dramatic, that took about 500 years. And now I can finally plug it back up. With the differentials out of the way, we're going to move on to the motor oil. I just might as well change it. I don't know how old it is, who changed it last. I did put some oil stabilizer in it because it was like a quart low when I got it. But I'd rather just refresh it, get everything off to at least a good start under my ownership. That is nice and black. Black oil, well burnt. Second flush of clean oil here, still coming out pretty black. So I'm trying to get this thing a little bit cleaned up before I put fresh oil in it. so it's not immediately just burnt. Next up is our oil filter. This is an old Fram spin-on filter. I don't know how tight it is. Okay, the new filter we're throwing on is a STP extended life. I put oil on that gasket or the O-ring already, so we are ready to throw this in. For motor oil, I'm using a high mileage 1030. This motor takes 5 quarts plus a little extra, so I put about a half a quart of Lucas oil stabilizer in as well. I don't know the true mileage of this motor, so I'm just guessing that it's going to appreciate some good high mileage help. Next on my list are the transmission and transfer case. In order to get to these, I'm going to have to drop this transmission mount / skid plate here. So I'll have to unbolt that from the top first where the transmission mounts are, and then I'll unbolt it from the frame here, get that out of the way, and then we can drain those two. We'll replace the gasket on the bottom of that Dana 20 transfer case, and then we'll put it back together and we will be done with fluids. If you see something dripping out of the corner of your screen, that is the coolant reservoir, the overflow. I filled it up, and now I know why it was empty. It leaks. With the transmission crossmember out of the way, we will move on to draining this transfer case so that we can replace this pan gasket that's leaking. That's all relatively new gear oil. When I first got this thing, I had a feeling that the transfer case was empty, so I went ahead and filled it up. So this is getting a good flush before we replace this pan gasket. I'm going to tighten the drain plug now because otherwise I will forget. Since I already had the transmission crossmember out, I replaced the transmission mounts here. But last but not least, for today, we have our transmission. Okay, and I have no idea how much gear oil is in here. I did not top this one off last time. It doesn't look terribly bad though. I'd almost go as far as to say it looks fresh. That's good. Good sign. I underestimated how much gear oil I was going to need for today, and I don't have enough to do the transmission. So we're going to put the transmission cross member back in, clean up our mess, and I will come back another day and I will top off that transmission, and all the fluids in this Jeep will be fresh. That is a really, really messy job. I knew it would be going into it, but I am filthy. See you guys day after tomorrow. So we're back today and ready to fill up that transmission. That's the only thing I left undone yesterday. I put tape on the steering wheel just to remind me the transmission is empty. So today we're going to be pulling that fill plug out of the transmission, and then we will fill it through the access area here up top. I'll show you what that looks like. So on the T150 transmission, your fill plug is, let me see if I can find it with this camera here. Boom, right there. And that's accessible from underneath the Jeep. You have to use like a crescent wrench because it's a square bolt. But once you get that loosened up, then you can fill it through the top. But you can see that is not easy to access. You're not going to be able to put a gear oil bottle here to fill that. So that's why I bought that syringe that I used to fill up the transfer case. I'm going to put that syringe down through this hole and into that fill plug. If your boot is actually attached to the transmission cover panel like it's supposed to be, then you'll probably just want to remove the whole panel. Since my boots are just kind of sloppily thrown in, I'm just going to go right through here to fill that up. So let's take that nut out of the bottom side first. This is the bottom side of the transmission. There is our drain plug that we used to get the fluid out. And up here on the passenger side is our fill plug. So we're going to have to use a crescent wrench to get that fill plug out, which I've already started doing, and it's just about hand tight now. So I should be able to reach up in there and get this thing out. This transmission should take about 2 quarts of this oil. Without this syringe tool, it would be very hard to get this oil in there without making a massive mess. So this is definitely something that you'll want to pick up. I'll have a link to it through Amazon in the description of this video. And that topped it off. You can see that it is actually kind of pouring out right now, which is a good sign. That means that the transmission is full. So we can put that plug back in now and clean up this mess a little bit. With the transmission topped off, we are all done with our fluids. That's the end of this video. I am going to go ahead and run this through my motor and do one more oil change and oil filter change, just because I don't like how much sludge came out of my motor, but that gets us through front and rear differential, motor, transfer case, and transmission. So if you are changing your fluid on your Jeep CJ, hopefully there's enough information in this video to do all of them. I'm gonna get started on my second oil change, but I will see you guys later. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to more progress that's going on this Jeep CJ7. We also have the CJ5 now, and the YJ shows up this weekend. So plenty of stuff to work on, and my harness bar for my PRP seat project just showed up in the mail. So that'll be my next thing. I guarantee it. I will see you guys next time right here on Crawl TV. This is the second oil change. Let's see how it is. Pretty dark. It still looks like used motor oil, and it is brand new. Sometimes it's worth doing an actual motor flush.